Dogman Declassified, the latest book from W.J. Brendel, Ph.D. Real reports. Consistent patterns, no clear answers. Take a closer look at the evidence. Available now.
Welcome to Forever Paranormal, where shadows remember and silence has a way of speaking. I'm Dr. Bill, your guide through the strange and the unexplainable.
And I'm Deb. Every week we dig into what hides between belief and proof. Cryptids, hauntings, witchcraft, UFO sightings, and the stories people swear are true.
We don't tell you what to believe. We just look at what's possible, what's been witnessed, and what refuses to stay quiet.
If you like what we do, follow, rate, and share the show. It helps keep the lights on.
And if you want to go deeper, step inside the crypt. Patreon members get the show ad-free, a full day early, and gain access to our entire archives, years of investigations, bonus episodes, and conversations we don't release anywhere else. You can join at foreverparanormal.com or by searching Forever Paranormal The Crypt on Patreon.
And remember that you're never alone. If you ever need someone to talk to, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is 988.
You know, if you ask someone who has never met a witch what they believe, there's a good chance the very first thing they'll say is that witches worship Satan. It is probably the single most common belief about witchcraft today. And the problem is, it probably came from a movie, not a fact. Welcome back to Forever Paranormal, where we know Natinak is more than a myth and where the veil is thin. Ghosts walk beside us, strange craft drift above us, and creatures move just out of sight. Every story is a door between worlds, and this week we step through the myths that have shaped what millions of people believe about witches. Hi there, Deb.
Hello.
I know you've been really busy, but did you have a good week?
Well, I'm still alive, so I guess so. How about you?
Yeah.
I have a feeling this week's episode is going to make some people uncomfortable.
Yeah, it might. Honestly, that's kind of the point, Deb. This isn't an episode about convincing anyone to become a witch. It isn't about changing anyone's religion. And it isn't even about proving whether magic works. It's about separating what history actually tells us from what Hollywood, folklore, and popular culture has taught us to believe.
Well, I can already tell you the first thing most people picture: black hat, black cat, broomstick, green skin, lives in the woods, probably has a creepy laugh.
Exactly, and you forgot the big wart on the end of the nose too, right?
Yeah.
And somewhere in that description, they're probably going to throw in Satan. So this week, we're going to look at where some of those ideas came from, which ones have some historical basis, and which ones have simply been repeated so many times that people assume they're true. But now, before we get into it, I want to ask you, what did you bring us this week?
Well, I recently watched some episodes of Skinwalker Ranch with you, and it seems to me each episode has some sort of conundrum or another, with drones and drilling and all kinds of sorts of things. They allude to this mysterious and apparently invisible space on the ranch and the havoc it wreaks on their efforts towards discovery. What is your opinion of what is happening down on the ranch?
Well, you must be referring to the mysterious bubble.
Yes.
They keep calling it the bubble, right? Well, I'm not quite 100% sure, but I have some theories. If you remember, I don't know, you may not, but other listeners may. You go back to the first or second episode, they had one of the guys that worked originally on the ranch out there. And he showed them a cave in the mesa that was blown up and filled in, right? And that's exactly where they're drilling. That's exactly where they're finding these anomalies and stuff. I think they already have a good idea of what's in that mesa. I think it was put there intentionally by humans. I think it was creating something for experiments they were doing out there on the ranch. And I think it's a way for them to bring in millions of dollars.
Do you think that they will ever show what they find? If it is something that is paranormal, do you think they'll ever come to an end and say, this is the what we've been waiting for, and here it is?
I doubt it. I think the show will probably come to an end before they ever tell us what they found.
No.
All right, so let's go ahead and move on from there. That was a really good question, though. Thanks for asking that.
Yep.
So, Deb, you ready to start?
Yep.
Let's start with the biggest misconception of all of them. Myth number 1. All witches worship Satan.
I'll be honest, before I met you, I probably would have believed that too.
And really, you're not alone. In fact, I'd say that's probably the single biggest misunderstanding surrounding witchcraft. The interesting part is that when you start digging into the history, like I like to do, you quickly discover that the connection between witches and Satan just wasn't always there. I mean, long before Christianity even existed, people were already practicing forms of magic, divination, healing, herbalism, and rituals. In the Greek and Roman world, people used curse tablets, sometimes called binding spells, to influence rivals, do lawsuits, create love affairs, and to ward off their enemies. I mean, the Roman had augurs who read signs from birds and omens, while the Greeks consulted oracles for guidance from the gods. None of these people were worshiping Satan because, quite simply, Christianity haven't even arrived yet.
So where does the idea come from?
Mostly medieval Europe. Because as Christianity spread across Europe, many older folk traditions continued alongside it. Some disappeared, but some of the pagan stuff was blended in with Christian beliefs. We know that. We've talked about it many times. Others survived in rural villages where people relied on healers and charm makers and cunning folk. But eventually, those practices became viewed with increasing suspicion from the church. By the time you reached the great European witch hunts, accusations weren't simply that someone had cast a spell. The accusation became much larger. At that time, it was said that they had entered into a pact with the devil, they rejected God, they attended secret gatherings called Sabbats, they worshipped Satan, they flew through the night to get to the Sabbats. None of these ideas appeared all at once, though. They developed over centuries and eventually became part of the stereotype we still recognize today.
Are you saying nobody ever worships Satan?
Oh, heck no. I mean, I'm saying those are two different conversations. I mean, there's still people that worship Satan. There have absolutely been people throughout history who identified as Satanists or who intentionally incorporated Satan into their beliefs. But that doesn't mean all witches did or do. Those are separate paths. But unfortunately, over time, they became blended together in the public imagination until people assumed they were the same thing.
That's probably why so many horror movies still use that formula today.
Well, exactly. I mean, you need a villain? Make them a witch. You need them to be even scarier? Have them worship Satan. After all, it works for the movie because audiences already recognize the stereotype. That doesn't make it historically accurate. It just makes money at the box office. And I have honestly never seen a movie that was 100% historically accurate. What about you?
I doubt it, but to be fair, I don't think about that.
Well, I do when I watch something supposed to be a true story. And now, I'll answer this from my own perspective. I've been practicing for years. Not once has Satan entered into anything I've done. That's because Satan simply isn't part of my practice. Someone else's beliefs are their own business. Mine are mine. Those aren't the same thing.
I think that's actually something people don't realize. I don't suddenly believe everything you believe just because I live with you.
That's good.
I'm still skeptical about plenty of things, but I can honestly say none of what we've talked about at home has ever resembled what people see in movies.
You're right, and I think that's important, Deb. You don't have to agree with me. You don't have to believe what I practice. But if we're going to talk about witchcraft, we ought to at least talk about what witches actually believe instead of what some screenwriter tells us they believe. Now, that leads naturally into the second myth, that Wicca and witchcraft are the same thing. They're not.
Well, I think that's because witchcraft is the only thing most people, at least people I've been around, have ever heard of. And they associate the word Wicca with witchcraft because it sounds to me like a root word. At least it did till I met you.
Yeah, well, that's probably true. I mean, the easiest way to think about it is this: Wicca is a religion, witchcraft is a practice. Some Wiccans will practice witchcraft, some witches are Wiccan. Many witches aren't Wiccan at all, like me. We've talked about Wicca before, so we're not going to revisit all of that today. Just remember, they are not interchangeable terms.
Kind of like saying every square is a rectangle, but not every rectangle is a square.
Yeah, that's actually pretty good if you understand that one. It's hard to grasp a hold of, though, but I always knew you were pretty smart. So, if somebody tells you they're Wiccan, don't automatically assume you know how they practice. And if someone tells you they're a witch, don't automatically assume they're Wiccan. They're two different conversations. Now, here's another myth that comes up constantly. The Bible never defines witchcraft. It tells you not to have witches, but actually it does. Just not like a dictionary entry. It says to not practice witchcraft, but defines it by describing the certain practices that are condemned, like divination, consulting mediums, speaking with the dead, which is necromancy, casting spells, interpreting omens. The Bible identifies the practices rather than stopping to give a one-sentence definition.
So that's probably where some of the confusion starts. People hear the English word witchcraft without looking at what it's actually referring to.
Yeah, exactly, Deb. And whatever your religious beliefs happen to be, I mean, it's always better to read what the text actually says than to rely on what someone else tells you it says. But let's go ahead and leave religion behind for a minute and talk about probably the most recognizable symbol associated with witchcraft, the pentagram.
I'll admit this one changed for me over time. When we first got married, there wasn't a pentagram anywhere in the house. Then years later, I remember seeing one on the table next to your altar. Now you wear one on a ring almost every time you leave the house.
Yeah, I do. And, if someone noticed it while I was standing in line at the grocery store or something, there's a good chance they'd immediately assume it represented something evil. Historically, the pentagram meant different things to different cultures for thousands of years. Modern witches often associate it with the 5 points, with earth, air, fire, water, and spirit. Like almost every symbol throughout history, its meaning depends on who is using it and why.
I still don't look at it exactly the way you do, but I also don't have the reaction I probably would have had 20 years ago.
Well, yeah, and that's really the point, Deb. I mean, understanding something isn't the same as believing in it. You don't have to agree with someone to understand what a symbol means to them, like a cross or something, right? Now, let's move on to one that's a little more fun. I like this one. Witches fly on broomsticks. And I'll tell you right now, if I could fly on a broomstick, do you really think I'd be paying all that money for gas?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, I'd have to drive all the time then, because when we make grocery runs and everything, you wouldn't be driving anymore. We'd have to take my broomstick. The image of a witch flying across the moon on a broomstick is one of the oldest stereotypes in European folklore. Where it came from is still debated. Some historians connect it to the older fertility customs involving broomsticks. Others think it evolved from stories about witches gathering at night and getting to their Sabbaths. There are several theories. What there isn't, though, is evidence that witches were literally commuting through the night on household cleaning supplies.
Well, that's going to ruin a lot of Halloween decorations.
Yeah, probably, but it also shows that we've been talking about all episode. The story gets repeated enough times and eventually people stop asking where it came from. Now here's another one Hollywood loves. That witches spend all their time casting spells. Honestly, at least not the ones I know.
I can back you up there. I've watched you spend far more time reading books than performing rituals.
Yeah, I mean, I've got my monthly things I do on a full moon and stuff like that, but that's because people see the ritual. They don't see the study behind it. Most practitioners spend far more time learning history, the folklore, the symbolism, the herbs, the traditions, and the different cultures than they ever spend performing any kind of workings. Movies just skip all of that because watching somebody read for 3 hours doesn't sell movie tickets. But the next one is interesting because I don't think one answer that fits everyone. There's not one answer. Can anyone become a witch?
This one I'm not even going to try to answer. You've been doing this a long time. If somebody walked up to you tomorrow and said, I want to become a witch, what would you tell them?
Well, the first thing I'd ask is, why? I mean, people come to witchcraft for a lot of different reasons. Some are just curious. Some are looking for answers. Some think it's mysterious. It is. Some saw something on social media that made it look exciting. It can be. Those aren't all the same motivations. For me, becoming a witch isn't about buying a few books, lighting a candle, and deciding that's who you are now. It's something that requires study, patience, and a willingness to question yourself. And depending on the tradition we're talking about, the answer can be very different. Some traditions believe anyone willing to learn can practice. Others require some formal initiation. Some believers were born with certain gifts. Others believe these gifts can be developed. There isn't one answer because there isn't just one form of witchcraft.
So if somebody tells you there's only one right answer,
I'd probably keep asking questions because that's one thing I've learned over the years. The more you study witchcraft, the more you realize how incredibly diverse this is. I mean, someone just sits there and goes, there's one answer. That means they don't know much about witchcraft. They're very new and they're trying to tell you what they learned on TikTok. But now here's another one I hear all the time. Every witch has a familiar.
I think we can blame the movies for this one too. It's always a black cat.
Yeah, they certainly helped. I mean, historically, familiar spirits appear in European folklore, especially during the witch trials. But the idea has changed over time. Because today, a lot of people assume familiar automatically means a pet. It doesn't. In fact, you and I, Deb, we don't even have pets. So if I were talking about my own practice, I'd tell you the animals I pay the most attention to are crows and hawks out in the wild. That doesn't mean everyone has to accept what that means to me. It's simply part of my own experience. Some witches believe they have familiars. Some don't. Some view them as spiritual companions. Others see them as symbolic, and many witches never use the term at all.
So once again, there isn't one rule that applies to everybody.
Exactly, which brings us to our final misconception. That magic is the same everywhere. Well, I'm going to tell you, it isn't. Every culture has developed its own traditions, its own beliefs, its own rituals, and ways of understanding the unseen. Some practices look similar, yeah. Others are completely different. Trying to lump all of them together under one label is like saying every religion is the same because they all have places of worship. The similarities can be interesting. The differences are just as important, though.
That's probably the biggest thing I've learned over the years. Every time I think I've got witchcraft figured out, you hand me another book, and suddenly I realize there's another tradition I've never heard of.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the perfect place to end this one because maybe the biggest myth isn't that witches worship Satan, or that they fly on broomsticks, or that every witch has a black cat. Maybe the biggest myth is believing that there's one thing called witchcraft. There isn't. There are traditions, there's cultures, there's beliefs, and there's practices. Some are centuries old. Some are actually pretty modern. Some are religious, like some old folk magic, and some are not. And the more you study it, the more you realize that one word has become an umbrella covering an incredibly diverse world. Whether you believe any of it is entirely up to you. But if we're going to talk about witches, let's at least make sure we're talking about the real ones. Well, at least until next time when we discuss another tale yet to be told. Thanks for listening to Forever Paranormal. Follow, rate, and share the show. It helps others find us and keeps the stories coming. Step inside the crypt for archive and exclusive episodes at foreverparanormal.com. And keep up with my latest books and research at wjbrendel.com. And until next time, remember, the veil is always thinner than you think.